All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Joseph Joyner with Juniper Networks, and we're live back with another awesome discussion. Now, during the discussion, we have a couple of rules. I want you to keep your eye out on the chat for all the links we have for you. Feel free very much to ask questions, and all of your questions will be answered by our distinguished presenters at the end of the video. Now, we got a fantastic discussion in store for you today. It's going with some experts in the industry, and it's going to shed light on a very important data center topic. And I want you just to get your notepads ready. So let me introduce our special presenters for today. They put the pro and professional in the industry. They are data center masters. And most of all, they are experts at being cool dudes in general. I want to introduce to you all Robert Lancaster and Bill Wester. How's it going today, gentlemen?
Fantastic, Joe. Thanks for that intro.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
So now I am going to hand it over to Robert, and he's going to get us started with today's proceedings. Go right ahead, Robert.
Okay, great, Joe. If you can see my title slide here, we're going to talk about Apstra, which is a Juniper data center fabric management platform, and alongside me, Bill is going to look over my shoulder, and we're going to go through some things. We're going to talk about a couple slides and sort of set the table, and then we're going to show you the product and go through and do some things and show you how it can make your life much simpler when managing a complex data center environment. So what's different about Juniper Apstra? Well, for one thing, it operates the entire data center fabric as a single entity, so one system. And it utilizes the concept known as intent-based networking. And we'll talk more about what intent-based networking is and give you examples as we go forward. But basically, to me, intent-based networking is where you specify upfront what your organization needs, what features and capabilities. And then Apstra configures the network fabric, again, as a single entity, to provide those services. And then when you monitor the network, you make changes, it's all done through this one user interface, and it operates as a single source of truth. And we'll show you prime examples of that. Now,
Hold on, Robert. So this thing, you're going to use this to design a data center, this tool?
Well, yes. I'm going to design it, and I'm going to implement it, and then I'm going to operate it. And you know what's more, Bill, is I'm going to do it with not just with Juniper products, Juniper switches. I'm going to do it with other vendor switches as well. So that's an additional layer of abstraction that's pretty unique in the industry.
So Apstra is a tool used to basically design, deploy, and operate your data center, right?
That's right. And it's almost like you could be reading from this next slide here.
Oh, wait. Yeah, there it is. Okay.
So because your network architect is the one that designs the network up front, and you can use Apstra to design the network really before you've even decided which vendor or specific switch models you want to use in the fabric. That's a cool capability.
So you don't have to have any switches. Like you could just
start, yeah,
and design your whole network, and then when you get your equipment, it shows up. Then you just connect it up.
You're ready to go. Your design is already ready to go. Now, you don't have to do it in that order. You can get your switches and set them up and design and go, but you have unprecedented flexibility in how you approach this.
That's cool.
Now, when you select your equipment, obviously you could have a different vendor's network operating system on there, and if you're doing this all manually, then you need to know the details of those network operating systems. And it's a learning challenge to know all the different ones and all the different features and things that are out there.
Well, especially if you're going to do something hard, right? Like, I mean, it's one thing to just connect a bunch of switches together, but if you want to actually use like an underlay, or you put a VXLAN or extend, right?
That's a lot of typing and a lot of.
Well, you got to know all the different commands for all the different company switches, and I don't
But
know.
the good news is that Apstra handles all that for you. It gives you visibility in what it's doing, so you don't have to trust a robot to run your network, but you can, you know, so we'll show you how. But the point is, this center point here on the slide is the software delivers how. You tell it what, that's your intent. That's what you intend for this network to be able to deliver functionally. And the software is going to program the devices according to that intent. But I don't have to worry about the you know, the minute details of all of this. But if I want to know what they are, so I can see them. And then once you've done that and you've deployed configurations, network fabric is operating, then the operations team has the ability to use this because of unique capabilities with telemetry and analytics, you know, to see what the state of the network is. So let's see what the next slide talks about there in that regard. So day one or day zero on the left side here, that's where you're doing that design we were just discussing. And as soon as you bring up the devices and get them ready, you're installing some device agents. And those device agents, we'll show you those in a second, but those agents can either reside on the Apstra server, or they can reside in the guest space on the devices themselves. And we'll take a look at some examples thereof. And then we're going to deploy the configurations. And then we're going to show you what this system does on a, you know, on the day 2+ time frame, you know, how it sees things. All right. The circular here is really a key component of intent-based networking, because I am taking a digital model of the network where I've captured my intent, and now I'm going to compare the state of the operating network devices to that intended state. And if there's any variance, you know, between the operation of the network and what my intent was, it's going to notify me. And it's going to do it in an intelligent way that gets right to the point of the problem, really, before, you know, before you could ever log into a device and start running pings and, you know, show commands and looking at config. So let's get to it.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah. So talking about those analytics and things, you know, there's a lot of data that flies around in a network. You know, devices are looking at interface counters. There's, you know, there's routing protocols. There's tons of things. You mentioned, you know, EVPN, VXLAN earlier. That's a lot of complexity in these devices. And so you really want something that can watch all of this stuff at one time. And that's where intent-based analytics comes into play. Because you got all these events here represented on the left side of this, and then you've got your Apstra server with your design, your captured intent, and so you're bringing that data in. That single source of truth is providing the context, sort of the framework that makes all of those little events and data points, you know, more meaningful. You know, so you're not just looking and seeing a bunch of stuff and going, I guess that's okay, or maybe that's not okay. This, you know, Apstra gives you the context of all of that.
Kind of like a filter that just operates on things that you care about, right? So like,
yeah. I mean, it knows how the network's supposed to be operating, and it has baseline knowledge of that. And then anything that gets outside of those parameters, you're immediately notified. And we'll see some examples here.
interesting. So like if I lost my like default route or something like that, all of a sudden it would be like, hey, that's kind of important.
Hey, there's a route problem here.
Yeah. Okay.
And usually things like that, you know, I mean, have associated events with it. You know, other things are happening that are associated with that problem or may have caused that problem. And oftentimes when you're troubleshooting the network, you're looking at that one thing. Oh, I know this route's missing, but I don't know why.
Right.
You know, you have to poke around. What Apstra shows you, since it has all of this knowledge, you know, from your intent, it's going to bring your eyes to where the root of the problem much faster than if you're doing it on your own. And that's really why people want to do automation these days, because you can take your network team and let them do more important tasks than spending their time hunting through a haystack looking for the needle.
Or open a case with support and then have them try to figure out what's happening, and they don't even know anything about your network, right? So you're telling them, hey, it's missing, and it takes them half a day just to figure out what your network looks like.
Right. So do you want to take a look at the products? You want to look at Apstra here?
Yeah.
All right. So I've got two tabs here, you'll notice. And this one here, this is the blueprint screen. So in Apstra, this Apstra server user interface, a blueprint is an operating network fabric. And I only have one blueprint here, but I could have additional blueprints here to fill this up. So different fabrics, and maybe the same location, maybe different locations, but I've got all of this visibility right here on this top level. And
so
if
blueprint's kind of like the data center network, right? Like one data center.
Yeah, and you can see here's some details about what's underneath this blueprint, and it's 2 spines and 3 leaves. So we have a 3-stage clove fabric, and this one happens to be running VXLAN with an EVPN control plane.
And that's all been set up.
Yeah, it's already set up in operationals, because to go through the design process and create my logical devices, which are abstracted generic switches. I've got to create interface maps, and I put all these components together. This is all that design work you can do in advance of having your gear. And then I put things, a rack is where let's just give you one example here. Here's a rack where I've got 2 redundant switches, and I'm using the Ethernet segment identifier for my redundancy protocol. And so my data center is going to have a number of racks. It's going to have a number of spines, but I put these pieces together, and then I'm going to put them into what we call a template. And in this case, a template, here's the template I'm using today. It looks very much like the operating network we're going to see here in a second. But I've got one rack here with my redundant switches. I've got some servers connected here, and then over here I've got a single switch with a server connected to it. I'll show you the links between them. So that's my 3-stage clove fabric right there. So jumping back to this, I want to show you that my active network is clean and green at the moment here. Got some telemetry coming in. This is the default telemetry. This is that intent-based analytics I mentioned earlier. I see no anomalies because I've got my BGP peering, my cabling looks good, my configs, everything is good. I mentioned that this is managing this environment as a single entity, because all of this is representing the state of this entire fabric. And this dashboard here, which I use quite frequently, because it's got the same telemetry on it, but it's the state of my devices, and all of it is in one view. But this quick tour around the user interface. So this active tab I'm showing you, these are the devices that are operating right now. This is the active network, as the name implies. And if I click into one of these devices, I'm going to look at the details for that one device. I'm showing you connections from leaf 3 to the spines, and then here's my server that I have connected down here. And now all my telemetry is contextually based on this device. So whereas on the top screen, I'll just jump back up there for a second. All of that information is related to, I'm going to get in the wrong view here. So all my telemetry is related to all of these devices. Clicking in, I'm going to see the telemetry for that one device. And then when I hover over these links, look at all the details that I have about these links.
That's got the IP and the name of each interface.
Yep.
And what it's connected to.
Yep.
Okay. And what's the gray? Gray denote? Gray is like not connected, or?
Well, it is connected because I have the server here, but I'm running those agents I mentioned on each one of these devices, and I'm not running an agent on the server. So I'm really not, that's what the NA is. I mean, I know he's there and everything is good. This port is active.
Yeah.
Everything is working fine, but I'm not really looking at the details inside the server. I can drill in and look at further details on it, and I can see, that I don't have, that information supplied to that particular device. So let's jump back up to the top, and I want to show you what these other tabs are about here too. So I showed you the dashboard. That's my one-stop shopping for the state of the network. Analytics we'll talk about in a bit, but the staged area, this is where I make changes to the network. I mentioned I have a digital model. So this is where I work with that model. And when I make changes, I can add things, I can take away things, and we'll show you what that's like. So how about I add a new virtual network? Now, what this list right here is, I've gone into this virtual tab under stage where I make changes. And these are all the overlay networks that are in place on this. There's a lot of stuff. So you can see why having a computer and automation is going to help you. It's showing what these overlays are and what they're connected with.
It's a lot better than keeping track of a spreadsheet, right? With my VXLAN, VNIDs, my VLAN IDs, right? Yeah.
Yes. And if you're using a spreadsheet or Visio to document the network, every time I make an addition or a subtraction from the network, I've got to update that documentation. And usually I'm like, I'll get to that later. So your documentation is outdated immediately.
Yeah.
This is the single source of truth. When I make changes, that documentation, all of these details are tracked immediately.
Right, because you're making the changes here, so the documentation is here, right? If you want to find out what's connected to what, it's all right here.
Yeah, let's add some stuff here. So I'm going to go into routing zones. Now, what a routing zone is essentially a VRF, or a tenant. In this case, we've got separate applications or different customer environments, different organizations within the company, and we want to keep their traffic sort of segregated from one another, so that that we're not having applications interfering with one another. So the way to do that is to put things into a VRF. So I'm going to create one of these really quick. You can see today we're going to add a new VRF, and we're going to give it the name Red 99. Now, usually you use things like finance or HR or customer ABC, things like that. You use your own naming conventions for that. I'm going to leave the VLAN ID open here, because I'm going to let the system determine what to put in there. And I can specify if I want to, but I can allow.
It's not required though, right? You don't have to put it. Yeah.
Right, and you mentioned VNIs earlier. I can tell if this new network needs a specific VNI, I can state that here, or I can let the system allocate one. Now I'm going to select a routing policy. Now what this is going to determine what the characteristics are of my traffic coming into this overlay network or going out of it. So route maps essentially on my ingress and egress. Right, and here's the details of all of that, what I'm going to be sharing.
Or policy.
Yeah, that's my routing policy. So we're going to create that, and we're going to immediately see some things happening here. First of all, the new one shows up here in the list, but I've got some red indicators here in these different places. And what that's telling me, notice my active network is not changed at all. It's still clean and green over there, but I need to add some additional definitions here, and loopback IPs are what I need to do. So I'm going to add some loopbacks from this network here. I'm going to save that. You see it updating. It immediately turned green there, but it's not turned green here yet. So let's go see what else we need to do. We need to do that.
Green.
All right. So when it pulled those IP addresses and plugged them in for this new network, you can see it's building up my configurations and staging them in this uncommitted tab, but it has yet to push anything over here because I got some other stuff I want to do. So I'll go back in here.
We haven't made any physical changes. We're just making virtual network.
Yeah,
changes.
I'm planning, and the system is guiding me and making sure that I'm specifying all the resources and things that I need to do. So we're going to add an overlay to this new routing zone. An overlay is, in VXLAN, it's an encapsulated frames. This environment allows us to use layer 3 for the infrastructure, so we're avoiding any issues with spanning tree and things like that.
Yeah,
But
loop detection, right? We don't
yeah,
have to worry about layer 2, right? We can have multiple links from
but in
devices.
this, that's correct. But in this case, my application needs to have layer 2 adjacency. And I may want to put servers for this network on different parts of the data center. And I need to have that layer 2 adjacency, but I've got a layer 3 underlay network. And that's what VXLAN provides for us. And EVPN is the control plane that makes sure those resources can all find one another across that layer 3 underlay network. So let's make this a VXLAN because we want it to traverse our multiple racks that we have here. And I'm just going to use the same name here because I arbitrarily chose to do that. And I'm going to put it in the new VRF that I defined earlier, but I have yet to deploy. And VNIs, we're going to get those from a pool, as you see there. We're going to let the system allocate the VLAN IDs. I don't need DHCP for this network, but if I did, I would enable it here. I'm just going to use IPv4 for this overlay, and I'm going to allocate the subnet from a pool. And I'll show you what those pools are in just a second. There's one more thing I want to do here is, and I want to create a connectivity template, Bill, and I'm going to make that tag. And I'll show you what a connectivity template is and what I mean by tagging here momentarily. Now, I want to these are my racks, so I want to make sure that this new overlay appears on each of my 2 racks in my environment, and I can just click this top button and it selects them all.
Okay.
And resource pools.
So it's going to deploy that on all those devices, basically.
That's right. This new VXLAN that we're clicking through and defining our intent. I intend for this network to have this overlay with these details that I'm specifying here.
And you're just not, you don't care what the VNI is, you're just going to get it from a pool of VNIs, right? And that way you don't have to keep track of it. It's virtualized or abstracted, let's say, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So let's create that. We're going to see some similar things as what we saw a moment ago, because it's telling me that, all right, you did that part, but what about all this stuff, from the pool that you were talking about? So here's my resources over here. I've got these pools that I created previously for my VNIs, my IP addresses, and my ASN. So that's where I'm pulling these elements from, and these are those resource pools that I'm accessing through this blueprint in the UI. So I need a new a subnet address range for my new Red 99 overlay. So I'm gonna pull that from this pool here. And again, you're going to see it thinking about it. It's going to get in the information it needs. This is what makes using Apstra so great, because it is going out and finding everything that needs an IP address. It's getting it from these predefined pools, and then it's allocating it into the configuration. So
it created a /24 for that. What did it create? The Red 99. Oh yeah, it did. Look, 172.16.1.0/24. Hey, that's cool.
Yeah. And you see the details here. Let's see, Red 99 is going to be
Red 99 is up there in the middle.
Yeah, and there's my /24 that pulled from that /12. So that pulls the /12. And if I hover over that, I can see that I've got a lot of headroom left in that address range there. So that's kind of handy to have right at your fingertips. Now, it's staging all of these things as the name implies. And so I'm going to go in here and take a look at what we set up here. I've got the connectivity template that I told you I would tell you what it was in a moment. I've got the routing zone, which is that VRF for our new tenant. And here's that virtual network inside that routing zone. Now, I could go ahead and just push this to the active network right now, Or I can, review the changes,
What is it changed, like
Yeah.
show, yeah.
Okay, well, let's see. Let's go to this one switch over here. And I've got this detail here, this incremental configuration. And I can look at that and I can see the configuration changes for these devices that is staged here. We're going to add these elements. And you can see that the references to Red 99 in these configuration changes that are going to be added when I choose to commit it to the fabric. As you can see, I had a commit button here, but I have not. So
What's that full nodes diff thing do?
So that's going to show me excruciating detail about all of these elements.
Oh,
That I have. All of the things are going to be affected by the intent changes that I've entered here are all here. So this is what I mentioned early on, that you can get a robot and some automation software to help you run a network, but you still need to know what's going on in there. So this gives you the visibility down to the a very finite level of all of the things that this system is planning to do. And because all of these things are green, and because we're doing this continuous validation loop, where everything I'm doing, it's checking to make sure that it's legal, it's possible. It's not going to ever allow me to push an invalid configuration from the staged area into the active network. That validation.
Otherwise it would generate an error, right? There you'd have like a warning or a build error, it looks like, right?
That's correct. And that's what those red indicators were earlier too, Bill. It was telling me, hey, you can't proceed until you address these red issues. And when I assigned those resources, it staged them, and now I'm in this uncommitted area.
So how do I see which, go back to logical diff, is there a way to see which devices have been affected by this change? Or is it just
that's in this full nodes
okay.
here, because here you can see specific interfaces. It's keeping track of who's doing what. I've got event logs. So again, it's that treating the entire network as one entity and having a single source of truth about all of my changes, everything in the network, and the state of the operating fabric, all of it. And here, if you want to go and drill into all of these things, you'll see where everything is being affected. And as I showed you on that incremental config, it's showing you what the new configurations are going to be put onto those devices before you ever act on it. There's one more thing to do here. So I'm going to go, let's add an additional server here. So in Apstra, we don't really know if it's a server or if it's a load balancer or if it's firewall or what. We just know we need to activate a port, and we're going to connect something to the other end of that port. And so we need to configure, the fabric side interface here. So we call those generic systems, just because it could be whatever we want it to be. So I'm going to add the new Red 99 server. And I'm going to give it this cool name. I better use small characters, right?
Wow.
Capital out of there. Now the label is what's going to show up in the user interface, and then the host name is obviously just that, a host name. Now in a logical device, this is kind of an abstracted representation of what my interface on my server is going to look like. So I'm going to select a 1 by 10 gigabit logical device to represent my server connectivity. And then I'm going to give it a tag. Now, system tags are a way to keep track of things. And there's really powerful things you can do with tags when it comes to IBA probes, which will
metadata.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a way to keep track of it, because the network has, potentially thousands of interfaces and hundreds of devices and all of this stuff to keep track of. And if I put in metadata to associate these things, then I can find all of those elements related to Red 99
search for it
via my tags, right?
Yeah.
So I've got these things, and I'm going to go to the next stage and look at this cool screen. It's going to show me, my leaf 3 that I selected earlier when I started this process. It's going to show me I've got interfaces already in use. Those are my fabric interfaces. And one of them is that existing server, right? So, and then these green ones are the ones that are left in my virtual leaf there. So I'm going to just add it to that one. So I picked 3. I told I wanted 10 gigabits. So I'm going to select that particular transformation. As soon as I select that, you saw that go green, right?
Yeah.
And select it. So it's making certain there's that validation again that I'm specifying all the required information. And I'm just going to give this guy another tag here for the link. So when I go searching for all my stuff, then I can find everything associated with this as long as I'm building my documentation for the network.
Yeah. That's cool.
All right, so I'm going to add that link over here. So I'm going to create that. And it's going to do what we saw earlier. It's going to stage those things. If we go back and look at our list of stuff now, we've got additional things up there.
Yeah.
So I got a link. I got the connectivity template that I still haven't told you what that's for, but I'm about to.
What? So can you go back to the picture? You should have changed the picture now, right? Did the picture change?
The picture has changed, and you can see.
Oh yeah, look at that.
See, he's this yellow color because that indicates it has not been committed to the active network as of yet. But I'm going to finally eliminate the suspense and tell you about the connectivity template thing. Now, when I created the virtual overlay, I had that tagged connectivity template that I clicked over there. And what that's done, so the process where I added that generic device, generic server, it just created the object and the link details to configure the interface. But what it didn't do was it didn't tell me what, VLANs or, my layer 2 and up details for that link. It just says there's going to be a link, turn on that interface. So the connectivity template, and we'll just jump in here and look, this is where those details are. So what it's doing, the contents of the connectivity template are that it's going to be in this VNI, red 99, and there's the actual number that was allocated from the pool. And then we're going to
VNI ID.
Yes.
Okay.
And so there's that information that it allocated, but I can always access it.
Right.
So the other thing it's going to do here is it's going to put a tagged VLAN on that new link that we created for that server. So that's what the connectivity template does. So let me go back here. I need to go back in there and assign it, because you can see these other ones that are already existing. You can see they're assigned on different endpoints, and I can.
So it hasn't put it on the port yet.
Yeah. So it's showing me ready, but I've got to assign it to that. Now, this is the list of all the links and things that I have in this environment. So here's leaf 3 down here. And then you can see how adding tags makes this much easier to pick out of this list of things. So here's the new interface. That's the port we selected. And so we're going to assign that connectivity template that's going to apply those details that were in that CT, we call it. And now I'm going to assign it, and you'll see that it's going to change that. It's now assigned on one endpoint. So it's going to have a tagged VLAN that's going to be rendered onto that configuration. Now, when we review all of this, here's all of the things that we've gone through, Bill, and that we've staged to add this. And I'm ready to do it. And I'm going to commit this. Here's my network documentation. I just it's prompting me to make sure that I update things, and it's all going to be stored in that single source of truth. So I added a new routing zone.
Yeah. Red 99.
Yeah. Let's just go ahead and put that in there.
Yeah. And then, so this is like a commit for like a GitHub commit or something like that, where you're just going to commit and then it's going to document it, or like in Junos where you can type commit and then.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm staging it. I've validated that everything that I've done thus far is good to go and ready to be applied to the network. And now I'm updating my documentation.
Yeah.
And
connectivity.
There's my so now I'm going to commit it. And you see the little thinking wheel spinning here. So what's happened, and it's very fast. it's why we like to use computers for this stuff, is it is communicating, the server is communicating with the agents for each device. And those devices know what device and model and operating system running underneath it. The server doesn't even really know. It shows you the details, but it doesn't really know that, you know, that in this case, we've got Junos devices.
Yeah.
And this pod over here, I'll show you this one. I've got the same setup, but now I've got multi-vendor devices. Let's go get some data here. While you're doing that, okay. So I've got a Nexus virtual switch. I've got an Arista virtual switch, and I've even got some enterprise Sonic devices here in my spine positions. So
And they're all interoperable.
that's that we're using the same exact features and things that I've shown you on this Junos pod in this pod here.
That's cool.
And it knows, those agents know how to talk to the operating system that's underneath them. So it's the same layout, same. So back to here, because we were just going to validate that our changes that we pushed out there are good to go.
So it looks
right. So this is where
there's
we at.
red 99. I see it right there.
Yeah, so let's look in that Leafs configuration and see.
Red 99.
There's the references, and this is from the device configuration. So we're in the active tab.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's exactly what's there.
So that's what's running on that device right now.
That's correct.
And
So
that's Leaf 3. So if we logged into Leaf 3 through the command line, you would see this config.
that is absolutely correct.
There's
my routing instance, right? My new VRF. You know, I've got,
and it's using best practices because it's got some settings there that I wouldn't have set by default unless I would have known. Like there's a bunch of information. If you go back to that other one, go up. Yeah. See, it's got like multi-path auto export.
right. And now the details, like you're pointing out here, are all included in the reference architecture.
So I don't have to go and look up these options inside of the Juniper documentation to figure out how to do this, right? It already figured all this stuff out.
The best practices for Junos, for EVPN, VXLAN are in that reference architecture. And you have a lot of flexibility to augment that and do, you know, adapt this.
Dude, that just saved me like a week of work right there.
And so
Yeah.
I got all my configurations updated to the minute with what I've pushed into the network. My network diagrams are instantly updated. You know, I don't have to go update the Visio.
Yeah, so when the boss comes over and says, hey, what's the network diagram look like? You can just literally send him a screenshot.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Now, there was one other thing I wanted to show you here that was pretty cool, because we're coming up on our time, and I appreciate everybody taking the time to hang out with us while we do this. But I've got this screen here, Time Voyager. What's that all about? Well, there's that note that I typed in when I committed these changes to the active fabric earlier.
Yeah.
And you know, and here's who did it. And I've got these things here. So what I've got is I've got a snapshot of the graph database that stores all of our intent. So when I make a change, I just make a new print, an impression of that graph and save it. So if I'm done with Red 99, that we no longer need that application or that tenant has moved on, we can tear that down instantly. We don't have to go to each device and get our magnifying glass and tweezers and look for all those references we were looking at. I can take this right here, and I'm going to queue rolling back to the previous state. You mentioned Junos earlier, that you can do this. You can stage things, put them in place, roll it back. I'm doing this to all of those devices at one time with one.
Yeah. So if this was deployed on, 40 switches, it would just pull it all out of 40 switches. I don't have to go to each one, right?
That's correct. Remember that list?
Yeah, it looks pretty much the same. Yeah.
So I haven't removed it yet, but I've queued those changes. When I commit this,
It will
Go
remove it.
through and pull all of that stuff out, all of those details. And if you don't remember how much detail it was,
That was a
take
lot of
look
stuff.
again, look at all the stuff.
Mhm.
So my stage value is take that out, nothing there, and here's the stuff. So it's really the exact reverse of what we did earlier. Go through and pull all of these elements out of the configuration. And
Talk
so let's do that.
That's an amazing amount of work done in a very short amount of time.
Just with a mouse and clicking. So I'm gonna put in my documentation here. And then I'm gonna commit it. So now I'm gonna have a new snapshot of my graph.
Yeah.
You know, where I have removed it. And here's where it's there, and here's the starting state when we started today. And I can save these little snapshots. There's a rolling list of 5. I got 5 here. The next change I make is going to kick the oldest one out. And
But you
there's
can save that old one out.
yeah. So so my original state here, I want to keep this one indefinitely. So I'm going to save it. So I click the little diskette icon, and it's going to save that one. So now
It
the
will never.
next one I add is not going to drop that one off. It's going to add another one to the list. And I can save 25 of these snapshots. And I've got this rolling list of 5. Now, if you're curious about keeping track of who's doing what and all of that, I've got this event log. So I can view what changes I made. I can see who made them. I've got timestamps. You know, I've got details.
You can even click view config. That's cool.
Yep. If I want to see what the config was, what did admin do at that time? You know, here are the exact details. So further documentation. This is great for compliance. If you've got to keep track of the details for your network environment, then and you've got to prove what the state is now, what it was yesterday. And if someone comes and says, hey, the network's not working well, you know, you can go to this and you know, validate what the state is at any given point in time. There's one other thing I want to show you here in the blueprint. If I go in here, I can look here, and I got another list that's even more granular about all the different stuff that we just did. It's kind of a roadmap of everything that we've done today, and the system IDs. You know how the Apstra system keeps track of all of these details. Now, here's some things that I did a while back where I had not completed all my definitions, and those failed. But ultimately, they succeeded when I followed the red breadcrumbs, you know, to correct the elements that I had omitted. So, what else can I tell you about this? What else do you want to know about this screen right here?
Show me a failure. Like, what does a failure look like when it all goes wrong? You got one
All
of
right,
those.
well, let's see what I got over here. How about this? I've got a snapshot here in my Time Voyager for this multi-vendor pod where it had some issues. So I'm just going to load that. And what this is that this snapshot is a capture of an actual event that happened to my lab that's in another remote location. So,
so they changed something and
Yeah.
didn't tell you.
well, in this particular case, I needed to swap one of my spine devices.
Oh,
So I'm just gonna commit this. So they changed out the actual piece of hardware, and I was able to use a thing called maintenance mode. So I was able to keep the fabric operating while I was taking this one device out.
okay.
And I don't want to give away too much about what this problem was.
It says there's some cabling problems.
It's some cabling problems for sure. There's going to be some other problems here because now that I pushed this configuration, this snapshot into the active fabric, it's going to be reacting to the state of all of these devices. So
Versus the original intended state doesn't match anymore, right? Basically,
that's exactly right. So when my spine was replaced in that lab, and they put the new device back in place, they miscabled it. I'm just going to tell you right now. That's why. And
so they put the wrong port in. They plugged it in wrong.
Correct. And I wasn't there. I couldn't look at it. I just knew that I had a broken topology. So what the heck, guys, so what do I need to do? Do I need to, call them up and have them go out and go through everything they did and check everything?
Well, you could do that, but you probably want to tell them what the heck's wrong, right? At
Well,
least where to look.
It would take more time for me to call them and have them go out on the floor to where that stuff is.
Or you could just change the config to match.
Yeah, that's what I did. That's what I decided to do. I looked at this and I went, wait a minute. I've got route issues.
Yeah,
I've got cabling
of
issues.
course.
I've got BGP peering issues.
Yeah.
Well, how do I know? And I knew that they were working on this one device, but let's go over to staged. And let's take a look at the links. All right, looks like everything is okay there, but let's
Fine.
and let's use this cool tool here because I've got this telemetry flowing back from all these devices. Obviously, I've got in my intent model in my graph, so I know how things are supposed to be connected up. And I'm getting data back from my devices that is telling me that it's not matching, like you were saying.
Well, they're running LLDP, obviously, it looks like, because you got that little button. Oh, yeah, look at that.
So I can do this and I can see what's happened here. Is that I got these two
Yeah, they
interfaces.
swapped them.
Yeah. So now that I know this, do I need to call them and say, hey, go swap these two cables? That'd make things much faster and than searching through all of the cabling in the racks, right? I could have them go out and swap those cables and correct this problem.
You could, or you could just swap it here.
So I use this and update my cabling map. And what this is actually going to do is it's going to tell my intent model to just go ahead and make Ethernet 0 the appropriate port for one link and make Ethernet 1 the appropriate port. And so update my configurations. Bam. So what it's going to do is it's going to stage these changes, right? As every other operation we've been doing today does. So I can look right here and I can see, oh, it's going to change these two links. I can look more granularly, just like we've been doing multiple times here, and it's going to change the description on these ports. So it's just going to go out and say, hey, Ethernet 0 is good enough to do what Ethernet 1 was supposed to do before. And so now let's commit these to the fabric. And I'm going to.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So you just kept somebody from having to go into that rack because you could figure it out without even having to go in there, and you just updated the model and it just.
And I can fix it right now. I don't have to wait on someone to go out there.
You don't have to go open a ticket, say, hey, you miscabled this device. No.
That's right. So it's updated those.
The cabling is gone.
Correct.
The BT stuff is still bad.
Yeah. So let's talk about what's happening here. So when the cabling was wrong, obviously the peers that were supposed to be on those links were down.
Right.
And the routes from those peering relationships were proliferated out into the other devices. So I had all of these different
missing routes. Yeah.
And I could really, just by looking at where these problems exist, I can kind of infer what I think the base problem is without even drilling in further and seeing exactly what happened. So it's kind of a blast radius of that particular problem. Now, why are these still here? The cabling went away almost immediately, but
it takes a while for BGP to come up, probably, huh?
Yeah, so you got the processes, you reconverging, and you've got the agents are polling information from the state, and as soon as we've decremented here. Peers are up. Now let's go and these
now we should see the routes go. So it's keeping track of all the routes.
It knows before we ever deploy the first configuration
how many
routes are expected to be on each device. Because we've got our IP addressing. It knows every detail about all the configuration, and so once it's deployed it's doing that one-to-one relationship, comparing the active state of the devices to the to the expected state. And that's the definition of intent-based networking. And it's managed this from inception, the first design thought I had about this fabric, all the way through, operating, making changes, adding devices, taking things away, fixing problems, identifying problems, right? Telling me exactly what's going on.
Yeah,
and
look at
then
that. The root
auditing.
cause.
Yeah,
Root cause
got
said that you had a cabling issue.
right. It knew that all of those errors I was getting was related to that cabling issue.
That's cool.
And so documentation, compliance, all of these things, one solution.
Wow.
So Bill, let's check with Joe and see if anybody in our audience has asked any questions during our session today.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? Well, you all
Hey,
were so
welcome back.
thorough. You all were so thorough. I don't think anyone has any questions, but I do have a question for our distinguished audience. How would you guys like to try Juniper Apstra? I'm going to pop a free trial of Apstra. Go ahead and click on that free trial link and you'll be able to try it out on your own in your own lab environment and be able to get into all of these goodies that Bill and Robert showed us today. Now, I will pass it back over to you, Robert. Bill, do you all have any last thoughts, final thoughts before we go ahead and close
I'll
out?
let you go first, Bill.
I'm just, look, I mean, everybody should understand the amount of automation and the level at which this tool can really help with your day-to-day use of managing data center networks. I've been a data center network engineer for years and years and years, and trying to troubleshoot and, you know, understand what the problems are and keep track of all these elements. I mean, just keeping track of VLANs is one thing, and what ports are what, and what switch has what VLANs assigned to it. Then you throw VXLAN on top of that, and oh, let's throw EVPN and some routing and BGP on top of that. You know, it's extremely complex, and this makes it relatively straightforward. So that's the big takeaway I have, is like, this is a very powerful tool.
Well, you gave me a thought there with what you were describing, you know, how much configuration goes into this. Now, I just happened to select, you know, one of the little Nexus virtual.
Oh, this is the Nexus. Okay.
Yeah. And so look at all of the configuration here to enable.
How long is that config?
It's got, let's see, let's just keep scrolling here. This one's not that big. It's only 434 lines, you know, or 430 lines. Look at all.
That's for like, that's for like 3 VXLANs.
Yeah, for 3 VXLANs.
Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen. I have a question that just came in.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right, so let's, and feel free, you all, you can ask questions as we go. We're still here. All right, so here's the question, gentlemen. Any idea/use cases on how to sync Apstra intent-based networking with a 5G slicing intent scenario with Menno?
Well, there's a lot to unpack with that question, but I'm going to respond to that by pointing out that the Apstra system has this developers area here, and if I'm going to be using the encoded workflows and capabilities of this product in conjunction with other solutions, you know, other management platforms or ticket systems or, you know, notification systems, you know, I'm going to use this REST API documentation. So it's built right into the product.
The product is API first, right? So the UI that you're using, Robert, is all based upon a backend API, right? So if you can do whatever you were able to do in the UI, there is an API that backs that up, right? So
that's right. So if I'm going to set up Apstra to work with and coordinate with other tools, well, like I think that question is asking, then that's just, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it with API integration, and it's, you know, it's a reasonably straightforward process to do that.
And I think as long as your network conforms to a standardized, you know, leaf spine topology with, you know, EVPN, VXLAN, and edge routing and bridging, I think, you know, you could fit any, you know, application subset, whether it's 5G or anything else in there. So
yeah,
I think the data center doesn't really care, right, what you're running on top of it.
Yeah. Well, and you do mention, the reference architecture again that we talked about a bit earlier. There's some other options that we're not going to cover today. But this product is flexible enough that you can do this 3-stage clove fabric. I can do what's called a collapsed spineless fabric. And then there's a new capability called freeform, which it has even greater flexibility that we will be bringing back to you to talk about in detail very soon, right, Joe?
Yes, correct. So we have plenty of new webinars coming out, plenty of upgrades to Apstra coming up, and we're definitely going to have many more viewing experiences and interactive experiences for you all. So we want you all to come on back and see us again. I just appreciate all of you, our guests today. It was fantastic having you today, and a virtual round of applause for you, Bill and Robert. Thank you so much for
Thanks.
giving us the demonstration and all the information.
Joe, I hope the people attending take you up on that offer to get access to try this out. What they're getting is actually one of these virtual work environments here, one of these pods. So you can go through and build up this fabric, follow the lab guides, build it out. Use
You got a lab guide too?
Oh my God. I got all of these capabilities in the cloud lab.
So the lab guide, you could just step by step through this, right? You don't need
all the stuff we didn't cover today to get this activated is covered in that lab guide. So you get the blank sheet of paper and then you get the details and you build this up.
Build it from scratch.
Build your own operating data center fabric in the cloud.
Oh, that's cool.
Take Joe up on that. Joe, thanks so much as always.
Yeah, thank you so much, gentlemen. I love doing this with you. We'll do it again real soon. And check us out on Juniper Apstra on juniper.net. You can sign up for some new discussions and talks we have take up on our free trial. And I guess from there, for Robert, for Bill, I'm Joe Joyner with Juniper Networks. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.
Thanks.
Have a great day, y'all.